Welcome to Delivering Viewing Experiences for Superfans with Amazon Personalize. My name is Liam Morrison, and I'm a Principal Solutions Architect here at Amazon Web Services. With me, I have Mark Wood, Product Solutions Director for Personalize. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about the industry landscape of media and entertainment and where the shift is happening into personalized content. Then I'm going to introduce the service Amazon Personalize and show how that fits into this new media and entertainment landscape. Finally, we're going to have Mark come and tell us how Personalize was able to integrate Personalize into their application for delivering content to fans. So, the media landscape today has changed to where everything is personal, or everything has the potential to be personalized, from the categories you see to the items that you see in a shelf. So where everyone thinks of personalization is the content they see in a shelf of top picks for you, per se. However, you have companies like Netflix, which are really going far into personalization and even changing the type of thumbnail art you see based on your activities and your behaviors. So you and someone else might see totally different thumbnails for the same piece of content. So really, personalization can take effect anywhere in a media application. So some of the challenges the industry is facing today is acquisition and retention of customers. So with the rise of direct-to-consumer platforms, there's an explosion of new options. So customers have so many options when it comes to what to watch. So retaining customers is a challenge. Once they've watched your top show, how do you keep them engaged to watch more content on your platform? So increasing revenue for VOD and ad-based platforms, how do you increase the amount of content they're consuming? How do you increase the amount of purchases they make? Finally, discoverability. How do you get them to engage with that long tail of your content? And how do you get them to find the content that's relevant for them quickly? There's a statistic out there that it takes a viewer 8 minutes to find a relevant piece of content, or up to 8 minutes to find a relevant piece of content on a streaming platform. So that leads them to potentially go to other platforms. So this surf fatigue as far as trying to find what to watch. How do you deal with all these challenges? One of the ways is effective personalization. So some of the foundational use cases in media and entertainment is user personalization. So how do you show relevant titles to a user? So top picks for you. Based on your activity, here's the shows we think you will like, or the clips we think you will like. Then there's the concept of, if you like this piece of content, here are other pieces of content you might want to engage with. So if you like this clip, here's other clips that you may also like. Then finally, personalized notifications. So when you have a lot of content and you're launching new content constantly, how do you make your users aware of the new content that's relevant to them while not notifying them every time you launch any piece of content? So these are some of the foundational use cases. So let's talk about Amazon Personalize and how that fits into it. So Amazon Personalize is a fully managed AI service for recommendations and personalization. So it delivers personalized experiences faster. It provides them in real time, and I'll go through a demo and show how that happens. It responds to changing user behavior. So in a VOD and in a clip-based application, when your users are looking for something, their intents change over time. So they might be looking for something at one point and then change their behavior and look for something totally different. Your recommendations should follow them and recommend with them. Accelerating the steps to deploy the model is very important. So how do you train? How do you retrain these? So Personalize has easy capabilities to constantly train and learn from new user behavior. And finally, it easily integrates into existing systems. And Mark is going to show us exactly how Personalize integrated Personalize into their application very quickly. So some of the features that make Amazon Personalize really good for media applications are that it can model user impressions. So it can take into account not only what the user clicked on or watched, but also what they didn't click on, which is a very important signal when recommending content. So it can take the order of the items presented to them and then note which was watched and not watched. You also can do item exploration, which is a fairly new feature that is very important for media companies. So that allows you to take new content that does not have a lot of clicks, does not have a lot of interactions, and boost those recommendations and get feedback as people click on them. So I'll show a demo of that in just a little bit. Another key feature that was recently launched is filtering for events and metadata. So that's very important in how you show your recommendations to viewers, and allows you to create those shelves, carousels, rails for media applications, or even just clip collections if you're doing types of clips. And then finally, cold start. So one of the biggest issues in media recommendations is how do you account for new users who have not yet interacted with your service, and how do you account for new items that have not yet been interacted with. So I'll show both of those capabilities in the demo and how Personalize is able to deal with the cold start challenge that customers have. So what does Personalize do behind the scenes? So again, it's a fully managed service where you take data sets. So you can take up to 3 data sets that are important for media applications. You can take your activity from your streams. That could be from your website, from your VOD app, whatever is generating the activity. So this is the interactions that the users have with your content. So if they're watching clips, you can note how much of a clip they watched, if they click on things, if they're browsing. These are the type of events that are important to Personalize. So this is a mandatory data set for Personalize to use, and it allows you to take in those clicks and watches. What events you choose to import into Personalize varies based on your use case, but for a media customer, it would be clicks and watches, ratings if they're rating, if you're doing an explicit system for rating. Depends on what your use case is, but it can model all these different inputs. Then you have your item catalog, so that's your item metadata. So with that, that's what you know about your content, the genres, the different types of information that is helpful. And then finally, a data set that's not mandatory but helps if you have user demographic information, so where they are, that type of information, it could help. But again, that is not mandatory. It is not important for the models to be trained necessarily. So once you import all that data, Personalize will identify the correct features. It will select the correct hyperparameters. You can select the algorithms, and we'll go through what those algorithms are. But it will then train a model on your behalf in your account. So it is not shared. It is personal to your account, or is private to your account. It will then host those models for real-time interaction or for batch processing. So again, end-to-end, fully managed AI service for personalization. So let's go into a quick demo that I think will help establish what I mean with those features and what is happening. So what we have here is a VOD, or direct-to-consumer application. This is a demo site that I created, and we have a bunch of content. For this, I'm using the Movie Lens 20 million data set. So that is 28,000 movies across 138,000 users with a total of 20 million interactions. So I've brought that into Personalize, and I've trained a couple of models. So there's a couple different recipes. For instance, I'll talk about here, one thing that's helpful is new items. So I have 3 pieces of content that are net new to this application. I imported these earlier this week, so these have no interactions. But what Personalize is able to do with the exploration is based on the item metadata, so drama for that, or documentary for the all-in, you can actually infer and boost those recommendations. So there is a cold start setting that can say prefer new content for a number of days after it's launched. So I'm gathering that feedback. Also, I have the top picks for me, which is me as a person. Here's all of the content. Here's the interesting parts. But I also have genres. So these are recommended shelves. So each of these pieces of content are recommended for me in the genres of comedy, drama, horror, documentary. I have all of those. You can also do like time-based, so decades. Let's now look at a single piece of content and look at a different recipe. So this is the Sims recipe, which is looking for if you like a certain title. So if you like the movie The Spectacular Now, here are other pieces of content you may also like. So this is the Sims recipe in Personalize, which is based on Amazon.com's technology for similar items. Let's go back to the user personalization and talk about the cold start challenge. So this is the default. I'm going to say I'm looking to watch comedies. So I'm watching comedies right now. For this demo, every time I click on a title, I'm actually sending a watch event. So by clicking on it, it's as if I watched the whole 2-hour movie. So I've watched one, I'm now watching another comedy, I'm watching a third comedy, so I'm just watching a lot of comedies. So finally, watch 4 comedies in a row. So now, let's see what happens. I'm going to go back to the home page, do a refresh. You can see the change in behavior. So now I'm seeing a lot more comedies recommended in the top picks, and even the action movies are comedy-based action movies. Again, I'm sending very distinct events in, so it's a lot of change. Normally it wouldn't change as quick. Another filter that I built here was the year recently watched. So you can filter in or out of different things based on qualifications like watching an event set in of a watch. So here, this is my recommendations of rewatch movies. I could also filter out movies that I've watched from the top recommendations. I've chosen not to do that. Now let's look at documentaries. I'm going to change my behavior. I'm starting to want to watch documentaries. I just watched 3, but I've watched 3 documentaries in a row. Now I'll watch that new documentary that just came out. Again, it's up in the recommendations. You can actually see now when I go back to the home page, the recommendations change. So now it's clearly seeing the change in intent, and it's now showing more and more documentaries as options. Again, because I'm sending such distinct events of watches in, it's changing quicker than you might see in a it would change over time as they watch a movie, so it would be a slower change. So with that, wanted to hand it over to Mark, who's going to talk about how Personalize implemented Personalize for their application.
Thank you, Liam. So I'm Mark Wood. I'm the Product Solutions Director for Personalize. This means I'm heavily involved in all of our products and making sure that the technical solution is the right solution for us. Personalize is a sports-based company, which means that we create digital experiences for sports fans, primarily websites and mobile applications, but this can also extend to things like big screen experiences, on-site experiences, things like that. Our mission is to create experiences that sports fans can't live without. We are partnered with some of the biggest names in sport today, so people like the English Premier League, Barcelona Football Club, the Australian Rules Football League in Australia, and a whole variety of governing bodies. So we do this by providing bespoke services to our customers which are centered around technology that we build in-house. We call this the Personalize platform. And what this does is it provides us with a common technology base to be able to build bespoke offerings. So this unites our product services with our solutions, and then we inject all of the live services that our customers need to be able to run live sporting events. So many of the features that we develop at Personalize are driven by our customers, and one of our customers came to us and said that they were very interested in talking about how we could use personalization to be able to drive and increase video views, and they were interested in what we might be able to do with machine learning to be able to increase that and think about ways in which we might be able to help them realize these goals. Unfortunately, this presented a few challenges to us, as at the time we didn't have really any experience with machine learning at all, besides very, very minor amounts. We didn't have any data scientists working for the business, and we needed to think about what this would actually mean. We really wanted to get something up and running as quickly as possible, and at the time Amazon Personalize had recently been launched and seemed like it might be a good idea. And we were thinking about what this would mean, and with a customer that had 15,000 plus videos, adding 10 to 20 new videos every day with millions of users, it really felt like we needed a solution that would actually use machine learning to its best advantages to be able to sift through this huge amount of data that we would have to present to our users. So we started out by defining our objectives and what our goals would be for this proof of concept. It was really important to us that we increase fan engagement with videos, and we decided that this would be measured in a simpler way as possible by increasing the number of video views, and making sure that we didn't then sacrifice users completing those videos just at the expense of gaining more views. It was really important to us they would complete those. And finally, we decided that it's actually really important we quantify this. So we needed the video views to go up by at least 10% to feel like they were statistically significant. And we needed to make sure that because we were dealing with sport, that we include non-match days as well as match days, as they work in a very, very different way to each other and generate very different amounts of load. So how did we decide to use Personalize? We felt that Personalize had a really low barrier to entry, which means that we could really test it out very quickly with our proof of concept and actually validate whether machine learning was making a real difference or not. Personalize also seemed to be really tailored to our use case and would enable us to give much better content recommendations to our fans. We did, of course, consider other options such as SageMaker and other third-party solutions, but we settled on using Personalize because we felt that we could get something up and running in a matter of days rather than the weeks or months that it would take for us to do so with SageMaker. So how did we do it? So the very first thing that we did was, because this was our first time using machine learning, we decided that we needed to start really small and to work our way up. So we started out by identifying a simple use case, and we decided that the smallest use case that we could possibly use would be to provide a recommended list of videos to watch next when you're watching an existing video. We decided that we would completely skip out mobile users because it was very easy for us to modify our website and to iterate on that very quickly. And then we needed to go through a whole series of steps, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail further on, but they boil down to gathering all the data and making sure that we got the data from the right place that we could manage. We needed to train the model, implement some proxy APIs to be able to inject the new personalized information. We also decided that it was really important that we A/B test so that we could compare the existing model with the recommended model. And then we need to deploy and review all the results and work out how we were doing with our experiment. So our initial tests meant that we needed to find a whole bunch of training data that covered the interactions between the users and the videos, and making sure that as much as possible they were tied to individual users rather than just IP addresses and things like that. We did this by using the analytics data which our customer had. In this case, that was Adobe Analytics, but any analytics system would work. And we converted the data into a CSV file, which contained a timestamp, a user ID, and the video ID itself. We just used a spreadsheet just to reorder all this data and to reformat it into the required format for S3 and to be able to ingest into Personalize. Really isn't that important at that point in time to worry about creating any sort of pipeline or model to do that. If it's just your first time, a spreadsheet is really simple. Data was uploaded into S3. We trained a model using the Personalize console, and then we just had a quick test to make sure that the results themselves actually felt like they were looking sensible. So our original application was, in this instance, fairly simple, or at least in this diagram is fairly simple. Our users would talk to CloudFront, which would then proxy our request straight through to the API, and they would get a list of videos. This is the API where we would then say, tell me all the videos that are related to the video that I'm watching, and it will return you a list of videos that were in publication order, and just say, here is something you might want to watch next. They will be filtered down to make sure that they were at least appropriate to the video that you're watching, but beyond that, there wasn't anything that was custom or special about this list. The very first thing that we did was we inserted a new Lambda function into the middle of the CloudFront to API request. This would allow us to proxy that request and to inject data when we wanted it to, or to just allow it to pass straight through when we didn't need to. This was fronted by API Gateway just because it's really easy to do that and gives us better scalability. Once we had that proxy in place, we could then start to choose to talk to the personalization service using the get personalized ranking API call. And this was allowed us to create an A/B test, which would then choose to opt in certain users and to just keep certain other users exactly as they were as our control group. And we could then pass that data straight back to our client application. This was great for us because it means that we were able to reorder all that data and maintain the exact same API, which means that there was very little change required in the website, and largely all we had to do was just point CloudFront at a different location, and there was almost nothing required. Once we had all this data up and running and we could actually conduct an A/B test, we were basically done in terms of personalized rankings and recommendations were being returned. But we didn't actually understand whether it was being a success or not. So we then introduced a second Lambda that would track the events for the A/B test and make sure that every single user was actually sending back which video they watched, why they watched it, which part of the group they were part of, and the list of videos that they were presented with so that we could start to run some analytics. This data was stored in DynamoDB because it was incredibly simple to do so, but any database will be fine for this. And then once we're actually recording all this interaction data, it's great because we can then start to use that data to train new models. And we can also use it to directly influence the model itself without needing to be retrained. So this same data can be pushed back into Personalize via the put events API. And it can then directly influence future recommendations for those users, which means that we've got a really useful real-time updating recommendation system. So the results. So as you can see from this graph, we had a control group and a test group, and on the whole, the test group actually outperformed the control group by about 20% over the entire 3-week test period that we can see here. It wasn't perfect for every single day, and there are certain scenarios where you need to be aware that it's not going to be just a magic silver bullet which is going to just do what you want. So we need to think about other ways in which we can then take this data and use other features of Personalize to really improve the recommendations that we're giving to our users. We found that 20% overall easily beat our prediction that 10% will be statistically significant. And this was really great for us as it proved that this was the right direction to be heading. So what's next for us? So after testing this out and seeing a really great uplift in video views and user engagement, is something that we can start to think about really taking forward in the future. And there are so many more features of Personalize that we can start to think about. So things like better focus just on recommending things without needing to re-rank them. So just what should I watch? Things like the dynamic filters that were introduced recently. It's great for us to be able to think about examples like the Premier League, where we can start to filter videos down by individual players or teams without needing to have different models trained or even just different filters. And we can start to think about other ways in which we can unlock this data for our customers and to think about how we can integrate Personalize throughout all of our products. And since we deal with a large volume of new content, we can start to think about how we can introduce item exploration, and we can start to pull through new items straight into the recommendations through the cold start APIs as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So before you go, I wanted to leave you with a couple of resources that can help you get started with Personalize. So we have a couple different blogs that are really interesting, talking about some of the new features we launched. So one of the most important things when evaluating Personalize or just implementing new recommendation methodologies is A/B testing, so you can evaluate the efficacy of your recommendations. So we have a great blog about how to do A/B testing to measure the efficacy. Then a blog on how to do that cold start recommendations that I showed you in the demo. And then finally, we have a series of GitHub Jupyter notebooks that will actually take you through building the entire back end of the demo that I showed you. So it'll actually walk you through creating all the recipes, creating the filters, testing the recommendations. So it allows you to get started and go forward with that. Another thing to note is there's a couple options when building recommendations or personalization using AWS services. Personalize, which is an end-to-end service for personalization, then SageMaker, which is an end-to-end platform for machine learning. So you have a lot of options when choosing how to implement personalization. So with that, thank you very much for your time, and remember to fill out your surveys. Thanks for watching.